It's my absolute pleasure to welcome both Corine Sombrun and Nadine Kreisberger to Talks at Google. Corinne is a French author, composer, and shamanic trance researcher. She has spent 15 years learning and practicing Mongolian shamanic trance and collaborating with researchers in neuroscience and psychiatry. Aside from this research, Corinne also collaborates extensively with artists and leads workshops exploring the influence of trance on creativity. She has written several books translated to many languages. The one that was translated to English is In Geronimo's Footsteps, and we still have a few copies here. Nadine's work is about accompanying people on their journey to understand who they are and becoming it. She combines various tools from depth psychology and dream work to business coaching and leadership training, from trauma relief, EMDR, to intergenerational work. She works in both one-on-one and group settings in the Bay Area and around the world. I had the pleasure to work with both Corinne and Nadine personally, and I know you are in for a treat. Please welcome Corinne and Nadine.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you for having us today. We're super excited. And thank you for coming, everyone out there and everyone here. I think you are in for a treat because we're going to tell you about an amazing story, which is the encounter of ancient technology and the newest technology. These days we keep talking about technology, and we forget a lot of the ancient technology, which we still carry and which we can still tap into. So we're going to tell you a story at the cutting edge of neuroscience and psychiatry and psychology, but rooted in ancient schools of wisdom and what's called shamanism. I'll give you the main headlines, and then we'll go into it. So you've all heard or heard about or experienced trance, a different state of consciousness where we can access information and transform things. And usually when we think about trance, we either think about shamanic traditions where there's a drum and someone goes and talks to the spirits, or we think since the 60s about taking LSD or mushrooms or ayahuasca and so on and so forth, and all those things that are more and more available here. But now it turns out that we actually can self-induce trance without any substance, without anything. And so that's some good news. It seems that it's a capability that every human being has. And Corinne has uncovered a way for human beings to learn how to self-induce when it's safe for that person. And then the next question is, what for? And that's where the research comes in, and you're going to hear about all the things that Corinne is beginning to do to see cancer research, research on obesity and all sorts of healing things, self-development, self-understanding, psychiatric issues. It can be a tool for many, many things. It's just the beginning of that research. So this is a story we're here to tell you, how it unfolded. The reason I'm here is that I do have a background in psychology, but also I've worked with many shamans from around the world, and I've always thought that on that journey to become ourselves, we need many, many different tools. And it's always amazing to combine psychology and this ability to go to other dimensions. And I met Corinne a few years ago, and we've been working together, and we're developing a protocol to integrate self-induced trance and psychology. And we're in the process of doing it. We're already working with people, and it's phenomenal, the results. So we'll share a little bit about that. So that's the reason I'm here. But so let's hear more about you. And so my first question is, like, how does it happen that a Parisian, very Cartesian, who has never dealt with any of that, ends up developing self-induced trance?
All began in 2001. I was living in London at the time and dealing with the loss of my partner and dealing with grief. And when my producer, I was working in the BBC World Service, the radio, and when my producer told me I can send you in Mongolia to do a report for the radio about Mongolian shamanism, I told her, oh yes, you know. Because the farthest I could be, the better it could be for me, you know. So I went in Mongolia to study by what shamanism could be, and I met this shaman, a friend of mine, Nara, accompanied me to this place. It's in the north of Mongolia, at the border of Siberia. And as soon as the shaman began to beat the drum, it did something very weird. I began to shake, and more and more, and I was feeling like I was transforming myself in a wolf, you know. I began to howl like a wolf, and I feel like I had a paw and a muzzle instead of my nose. And it was quite weird because I realized what happened to me, but I couldn't control anymore. So this was very scary, you know. And when the drumming stopped, the shaman was speaking with my friend Nara, and he told her, why didn't you tell me that she was a shaman? Because according to him, I react like that because I was a shaman. So he told me, so now you don't have any choice. We are going to keep you with us for 3 years, you know. And so I told him, no, it's not possible. I don't want to stay at the Siberian border for 3 years with you, and it was not possible. And he told me, yes, it will be possible, but I don't want to do that. He told me, you don't have any choice. If you don't stay with us and do what the spirits are supposed to teach you, you are going to die. Voilà. So, this is me 1 year later with my drum, and his husband's shaman, Duji, was keeping me, holding me during the trance. And I spent a lot of time in Mongolia, you know. It lasted 8 years finally. I went few months a year in Mongolia for 8 years. And finally, I discovered how interesting could be the trance state. The main point is that during the trance you are timeless, you know, you don't feel the time, and you feel less the pain. The strength is increasing. Did you see the size of the drum? You know, the big one. It's 7 kilos, 7 to 8 kilos. So it's very, very heavy, and I could manage to use it for hours, drumming and beating the drum for hours without any pain. The senses are sharpest, and the sense of self is modified. Of course, you feel like you are an animal, a wolf, but it's not only one animal. It can be an entity. It can be other animals. It can be a lot of things. And information. This is a main point because during the trance, shaman is using this special state to reach what he called the so-called world spirits, just to get information he is not able to get in another state of consciousness. So this is really important about the trance. So my question was why? Why this can put me in such a state, and an interesting state. So I decided to go through scientists, and my dream was to record my brain, you know, through EEG. But the scientist, it's him. He's Pierre-Florent Henry. He's working in Alberta in the hospital as a psychiatrist. And he told me, if you want to be recorded with an EEG, you are going to do the trance without the drum. you know, because when you are drumming and when the electrodes are connected to the computer, you are going to break everything in the laboratory, you know. So I don't know what you are going to do and how you are going to do this, but if you want to do the experience, you'll have to
self-induce.
Self-induce. Exactly. So I didn't know how to self-induce, because in Mongolia every shaman induces a trance with a drum. So I was thinking about the music of the drum, trying to remember the music of the drum. It was not working, and I remember, but at the beginning of the trance I was always shaking like that, you know. So I began to check. And I could go back to the trance by this way, you know. So it was my self-induction. I didn't know yet, but it was my self-induction, and everybody and his own self-induction. But at the time, I realized that this was working. I could shake and I could go through the trance. So when I've been ready, Pierre Florent told me, okay, now you are ready, so we can do the research. So they decided to record me in the normal state and in a trance state. And first, I'd like to show you a little video about what is the self-induced trance. Now, this what you are going to see is in another laboratory. But it's more or less what I did in the Alberta hospital, and I was moving much less in the Alberta hospital than here. So you are going to see how it's easy to self-induce a trance, but what the trance can teach us. You are, I am doing some sounds I am completely unable to do in a normal state. I am doing some chanting, and you will be amazed by what we are able to do in this state. You are going to listen a language. Oh, nobody can understand this language. Huh? It's not identified as a non-language, but we think it's a pre-language, you know, kind of pure information. Because when I do this language, which is coming out alone, I don't think about what I am going to say. But when I do this language, I understand the sense and the meaning of the language, but nobody can understand. So it's done. You know, it's very quick. This is a training. The more you train, and the more it's easy to go through the trance. I was supposed to feel there is a little bit of water in front of me, and the researcher wanted to know if I could get some information from this water, and to know, you know, the bird. This is the language I was speaking about.
So there were different types of water, river, an ocean, and poisoned and not poisoned, and they wanted to see if in the state of trance she could get the information on which water is which. And of course she was able.
So, this is a sample of what you can do in a trance. But each trance is different, as we can discover after. Each one develops a kind of trance, and it's not obviously like that. But each person who is doing self-inducing trance, self-induced trance, is able to reveal some own capabilities. And so it's different for each. So after that, I had to do the EEG recording, and here is one of the first images. Alors, on the left, it's me on a trance, and on the right, the 9 on the right are the control group women, 80 people, more or less, yes, 80 women. And they wanted to compare the brain activity for the control group and versus me. And you know, they immediately remarked that the brain activity was increased in the place where the arrow is. And this is me on a trance on the left, and me on the normal state. And there is a difference too, with a brain activity different, and it increased in this special place. So to sum up, this is where it is increased and where it is decreased. So it depends on the bandwidth. And here are the results. So before trance, the EEG is normal, completely normal. During the trance, there is a big modification of the brain activity. So it means that it's not magic, you know. The ethnologist had the idea that it was cultural. The trance was a cultural thing, but là we did show that it was a cognitive phenomenon. Voilà, and there is a right hemispheric predominance. And after the trance, the EEG was back to normal.
So this was the first time ever that a brain under shamanic trance was studied by scientists. And just a few months ago, they published the results in a scientific journal. So it's the first time ever that people thought about it, but it was the first time it was proved.
It took 10 years for this article to be published. 10 years. So now you can consult it. And this is a conclusion.
So it can be a powerful tool. So Corinne, my question is, so you did all that research and you understood you're not crazy, there's something happening in your brain. Why did you decide to then develop a tool to share it with others?
Because thanks to these researchers, we show that it was a cognitive phenomenon. So I think it was for everybody. And if I was able to self-induce a trance, it was possible for everybody. So the drum is efficient to put somebody in a trance for 1 out of 100,000 people. So it's 0.0001%. There is only 30 shamans in Mongolia for a population of 3 million. You know? So it's very few. So I was thinking maybe the drum is not efficient enough, is not powerful enough to put everybody in a trance. So I was thinking about a tool we could do with scientists to improve this effect. So I had, as a musician and a composer, I found in the drumming some parts very, 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 very powerful on my brain. I couldn't stop to go through a trance when I was listening to these special little loops from the drum. And I gave these loops to some scientists I am working with, and they tried to find how and why these special sequences were so powerful. And they tried to empower them much more. And we create a new tool. I had the chance to test this new tool, a sound loop. We call it a sound loop. In Les Beaux-Arts, you know, in the art school, in the National Art School in France, where I am doing workshop to show them that the moment of creativity is kind of a trance too. Huh? You know, so they agreed to test the sound loop, and the result was this. You know, 16 out of 20 undertook a trance. So we realized that, okay, everybody or more or less could go through a trance. But the next step was to try and to teach them how to self-induce it. Voilà.
Well, you tested it with many, many more groups, so that you understand of many different cultures in different places. We tested it also in California with a number of groups, and the percentage was always very consistent. It was about 80% of the people, very often people who have never experienced trance, when they are exposed to the sound loop, boom, they experience something.
And with the artists, we were thinking it's easy with artists, you know, they know the state. Of course, they know the state. But with researchers, it would be different. So we did test with all the researchers we were working with, and it was the same result at the first listening. They could go through a trance. 80% of them could be able to go through a trance, and at second or third listening, everybody was able to go through a trance. So it was a good.
And in general, what happens is, like, if during that experience, if the person has an experience and their body starts shaking or something like this, whatever happens to them first might be their key to self-induce. In the same way that Corinne said that to self-induce, she went back to the gesture she was making at the beginning. So in the same way, that's what can happen. So this is what we're doing now when we're working with people, and when it's safe for them, we're teaching them to self-induce. This is what we're doing. We're just observing what happens on their face or in their body, and then we get them to repeat that, and then boom, they can go. The thing is, when someone goes in that state, the person is always conscious, so there's always that observer seeing what's going on, and the person can come back whenever they want, which is very different from taking something. Because when you take something, you are under the influence, right, of that thing, because then there is the physical consequence in your brain and in your body of whatever you're taking. So this is a big difference. Then a very interesting and important part of it was, for instance, you started, I can talk about Francis, because this is the beginning of a lot of research. Someone in Paris, one of the top researchers in France, one of the people managing the CNRS, which is like the top, there's no such thing in the US, but it's like NIH plus MIT plus all the top research labs in the country. He was diagnosed with a very bad cancer, prostate cancer, metastasized to the spine, and he was given just a few months to live, and he was already paralyzed. He was barely walking with a stick, couldn't move the hips, nothing, really. And because science couldn't do anything for him, he ended up with Corinne, and Corinne said, look, we can try the sound loop.
And I can try to help you to self-induce the trance, to show you how to self-induce. He told me, okay. And the next video is the first listening of the sound loop. So you are going to see is he go through a trance, he undertook a trance, and you are going to see the hips moving like hell, you know, and
just watch the hips paralyzed and just watch what happens to them in the state of trance. For someone who has never experienced trance before, very rational scientist, researcher. So no osteopath, no physiotherapist he was working with could understand any of it. And then after that, what happened was that he started self-inducing every day. Even in the middle of the night, his body would wake him up and just start the trance. And his research is about studying, like developing an MRI to study the metabolism. And he realized basically that his body was waking up and starting the trance at the same time the cancer cells were in their own biorhythm spreading. So at the same time, his body automatically was waking up, doing the trance. And now we're 14 months later, he's in total remission. He's completely healed.
But it's not only thanks to this. He did a lot of
nutrition, changed his diet, and things like that.
But this, for sure, helped him to recover the body shape.
The body shape, and he's walking now, no more stick, and so on and so forth. And so, very intrigued by what it did to his body, he and also for other reasons, he's created a foundation to research, again, all that stuff with the metabolism, but one of the part of that research will be to see how can self-induced trance help in cases of cancer. So that leads us to the next step, to the next part of our talk, which is how can it be used, this tool? So one is this. Do you want to say a few more words about the foundation, or Francis, or?
No, he's gonna work on advanced methods to cure people. And this will be one of them. And he's working on metabolism, so he will be able to see how the trance can act, have an effect or not on the cell metabolism. So this part of the work he'd like to do. And he remarked that there is a synaptic trace left on the synapse after the trance, you know, and he could manage to reconnect consciously to this synapses trace after the trance. So there is apparently there is really a mark in the brain which could stay and head to a way of learning, some new what the body can do, and what the body has to teach you, and what the body would like you to do.
Yes, the second field of research for you now that you're starting is psychiatry. So you've begun to work with a psychiatric clinic in France. 20 psychiatrists there experienced the sound loop. And you can imagine that it's difficult for them to just let go and go into trance and make weird noises, because it might sound and look like they are patients, you know? So there might be some resistance in that group, but actually, again, almost all of them experienced trance, which is amazing. And of course, it was the first time for them. And so you're developing a program now, a pilot program with them, to see how it can be used in case of dissociative patients.
In this case, so dissociative disorder, depression, panic attack, and PTSD. So this is just the beginning. We didn't do anything yet, but we got the authorization to start this pilot program. The name of the psychiatrist is Dr. Lemoine, and he is very eager to begin this kind of researches.
Yeah, one of the examples, just to give you an example, is the idea is that when a patient has a dissociative episode, a schizophrenic person, and they just go, and it's usually extremely painful, extremely traumatizing, difficult to come back, and so on and so forth. With the trance, it might help them go in a controlled way in that state and learn to come back much more gently. And if they learn the path back and forth, but in a gentle and safe way, maybe it can diminish the trauma and the pain when they just have an episode. Maybe it can do something about the frequency of the episodes. We don't know. You're going to see.
We don't know.
So that's one thing. And the PTSD, that's a really important thing because, of course, you might have heard there's a lot of research using LSD or psilocybin for PTSD and depression and all sorts of things like that. But there might be side effects to those things. So now it would be interesting, again, to use self-induced trance with no side effect for those things. And you're developing a program with, again, the CNRS and the brain-machine interface.
Oui. What is important is to know, to be able to self-induce a trance, you need a key before. To go through the state and to know what is a state, So the key can be the sound loop, but a French laboratory asked her if it could be possible to help them to develop a brain-machine interface to help people to go through the trance. And after that, they will be able to safe and use the trance. So this is a new project we have with a French laboratory to set up this kind of brain-machine computer. So this was a new adventure.
Yeah, and also some VR virtual reality, because of course that might lend itself very well, to taking people on a journey where they can then self-induce. The next field, educational field.
You saw during the trance I am able to do something incredible. I'm not able to do in my normal state. So some other researcher in another laboratory thinks that it could be interesting to test what we could be able to learn during the state trance. Because we realized that some inhibited systems are removed moved during the trance state. So it should be why you are so able to do something we don't know we are able to do. So, but like to use this special to test and to try to know where and how we could learn and what we could learn in this special state.
Yeah, we all know we have so many latent capabilities, right? And for instance, in circumstances of high danger, we suddenly can run faster than we ever thought we could. So we have those capabilities in us, and so many. So the idea is like, okay, let's try in that self-induced state and see what we can explore. Mm-hmm. And the last one is psychology, and this is where we're collaborating. And now it's been a year, so there's more time. I mean, we've worked with a number of people, so now we can see a bit how it works. So it's fascinating to see what happens when you combine verbal and nonverbal. Basically, when you combine the more classical tools of psychology, even dream work, which already goes into the unconscious somewhere, and Corinne's work and the capability to self-induce. So just to give you an example, with a few people I work with, and we go deep in that kind of one-on-one work, there were things we could not understand where it was coming from. Like some deep anxiety or some deep phobias in the person. We just couldn't. And nothing was appearing in the dreams because that person was too stressed to even remember their dreams or, whatever was happening. And so we couldn't trace the core, the root cause of that problem. And if we can't understand the root cause, we can't change it. And then that person who had never experienced, ever experienced trance was exposed to the sound loop, boom, It was phenomenal what she experienced. And then we spent more time with her, and we were able, so she was able to self-induce. And then when she was, before self-inducing, we asked the question, because that's the thing. When you go in a trance, you can either just go and see what shows up in terms of material, what you see, what you feel, what your body does, or actually you can ask a question. You can have an intention. And so we did that a number of times where we asked a question about key points we could never understand, and she got answers that I don't know how long it would have taken in a more classical therapy to get those answers. And it comes in a way which is so real that it gets etched in the cells. You know, it gets etched in your understanding in a different way. It's not intellectual, because you really feel it. And so it was a big breakthrough. And then I come in and we do the integration, the verbal integration, because again, and Corinne keeps insisting on that, to have a trance experience just for the sake of it. She calls it tour de manège, which I love in French. You know, like when you do a carousel thing. It's like just entertainment. It's just an aha moment, you know, and then what? If you don't work on the material that's being revealed, if you don't work on how to integrate it in your life, what's the point? I mean, and worst case, actually, what gets exposed is actually traumatizing or painful material. And if there's nobody to help you integrate that, it's actually dangerous. So
often hold up Indonesia as a role model.
the spirits are saying, yes, you're right. So this is what we're developing. We're developing a protocol to also teach people to self-induce when it's safe and so on and so forth, individuals. And so as you can hear about all those things, this is an ancestral, timeless capability in every human being. But now with science and technology, we can explore it differently. And it's like really beginning to discover a new continent, everything we're describing, in how to use that tool for all those different things. It's just the beginning of the research.
So we don't have any answer yet. But this is the beginning, and the researchers are eager to go through that, and that think that it is promising. Voilà, but that's it for now. Yes. And we have to say too that it's not possible to leave this kind of tool for everybody. You know, it will be just for people trained with it, and physicians and psychiatrists and people who are able to manage this without any danger.
Mm-hmm. So that's it. Very exciting things. We have a few minutes for questions. So, yes.
Yes, I have two questions. So one,
Wait for the mic, please.
Press the mic.
Yes, I'm not speaking loud enough.
No, there are people joining remotely and they won't
Okay.
hear you.
So first question is, you mentioned brain-machine interface. So what's the idea behind that? Like how, like you would have some sort of a machine that affects brain waves and stuff, and then puts you into a trance? Or?
The computer will analyze. You have electrodes on your head in the brain-machine system, and the computer will analyze the brain waves and help you to go through a trance. Voilà. Through a special. This is not my
favorite. So the computer would just read your brain waves, and then you would.
And help you to go through a trance, because I'm gonna give my head, you know, to do some marks and to indicate what is the trance state to the computer, you know. And on this model, researcher will be able to create. Comment ça s'appelle en étalonnage?
Yes, so basically by recording her and putting that in the program, the computer program will know where the brain of that person should go to access that trance, and so that's what the computer will do.
So
pushing
it's a feedback mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically,
It's neurofeedback.
You're doing
Neurofeedback.
something by yourself, and then you're saying,
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
are you going there or are you going somewhere else?
It's neurofeedback. Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, what's the difference between this trance and then self-hypnosis?
Alors, we did some research in MRI, just to know what part of the brain were activated during just when I decide to go through a trance, or when somebody decide to go to an hypnosis experience. And the MRI showed that it was different place in the brain which were activated during the trance, this kind of trance, and the hypnosis trance.
Okay, so you're saying it's a different thing. Well,
Seems
at
to be.
least based
Seems
on
to be.
however the brain.
Different way, part of the brain activation.
Okay, and I have another, maybe a wild one, but I don't know what would be the difference between this and then a state of an enlightened person, like, you know, some guru that achieved, like, you know.
Alors, we did some EEG experience too, and they realized that between the trance, comment on dit le repos, l'état de repos?
Yeah, when the person is resting in between trances.
Resting state between the trances was similar to the meditation experience, and people who were meditating a lot. And it's kind of same thing.
It's the same.
Yeah.
So
same,
I
brain
had,
pattern.
yeah, and I had experienced some enlightenment during some trances, not each time, huh? But I had.
So yeah, so that was really fascinating. That in the resting state, her brain is the same as the one of extremely advanced meditators who have meditated for decades. Because they compared her to Buddhist monks, basically.
Thank you.
Yes.
So there, in the trance state, there's a resting period between the trances? Is that what you're saying?
It was a special experiment,
Oh, I see.
experimentation. So they asked me to go through a trance, to stop, and another one, and stop, and another one. Like that, they could EEG my brain to know what.
But actually, I just want to add that my own experience, self-reported experience of a lot of people who've learned with her, it's a sort of high, you know, like it's a sort of place of empowerment and high after the trance. That might be that thing of enlightenment, close to it somewhere. Yeah.
And can you tell us which part of the brain this trance activates?
It's written in the article you are going to see, yes, because it's not my field. Huh?
I'll have to read it.
One of the last things that you mentioned, you said that you don't have the answers yet, and I was just wondering what some of the most pressing questions were that you have. In other words, one of the last things you mentioned, Corinne.
Could you speak slowly? Because
sure. One of the last things you said was that you don't have. You said we don't have the answers yet, and I was wondering what are some of the most pressing questions that you're looking for.
C'est quoi les questions?
The answer we are looking for, and does it work in PTSD? Does it work with dissociation trouble? Does it work? This is the answer we'd like to have. But we tried on few people, so it's promising, but it's not. You know, you can't count on this, and 5 people is not all. You know, so we have to go further.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, the two of us here, we're both documentary filmmakers, and we're working on a project where there's a doctor, an MD, PhD, that worked on something in the 50s and 60s that's fairly similar to this work, at least in touching some of it, and but no one really listened to him. And I was wondering, like, how do you have similar issues? In other words, the trance, in some sense, do you have any issues with getting some of your research seen? By either the academic community or other communities, that you're just kind of getting the attention of people, just because it's not necessarily yes. We seem to be opening psilocybin, LSD, some of these things as being options for treating PTSD and other things. And so my question is, do you have any issues with getting your work seen and understood easily, I guess, by the academic community?
It is controversial for people who just don't know, so they hear that, they associate it with weird things, you know, just out of ignorance. And so for Corinne, I can say it, she couldn't say it. It's been an amazingly courageous journey. And also, she's in France, you know, it's not California. It's a little bit less, or it used to be a little bit less open to all those things. So yes, it's been difficult, but as Corinne says, if it hadn't been that difficult, maybe she would not have been that rigorous in her scientific grounding of that work, you know? Because she so much wants to make sure that nobody can find a breach into that work, and nobody can say, you know, it's voodoo, it's shaman, blah, 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 with their associations with those words.
Sure.
that it forced her to do it in a super rigorous way. Yes, but it is challenging, but there is a momentum right now, because just in the last few months, all those things have been happening. So it's like her work of 17 years is now beginning to pay a lot of fruits, which is beautiful, for the benefit of all sentient beings.
I was really interested in when you would be in this state. You had said there was a certain language that would come out, and you were unsure of where this was coming from. Are you doing anything to look into that? Is there any sort of research?
Not yet. It was not a priority, but we should. We have a lot to do, and to try to understand with the linguists what could be associated to this kind of language. Yes.
Would you compare that to something like automatic writing and that sort of thing?
It comes along like automatic writing comes through somewhere we don't know, but this comes out. But it has a meaning. You understand the meaning when you say it, you tell it, but we don't know where it comes from.
I just want to add one thing to you, that in the sessions we do one-on-one with people, Corinne does a trance on them first, and in several cases, when Corinne is doing her trance, the person began answering in that same language. And they were like having a dialogue somewhere and really understanding each other.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's why I was talking about a pre-language. It's something who could tell you directly to your cells instead of your mind. It's very weird and very interesting, I think.
And people whose native tongues are different. So again, really intriguing. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question. Are you aware of this is always an observation, so you were recording yourself or you were observing someone. Are you aware of things that you're saying and doing with your body in that trance state? Is the person aware of the things that they're saying?
Well, yes, absolutely. That's the thing. There's always an observer aware of what's going on. Always. And you can always decide to come back.
Interesting.
Yeah, the observer is there.
Another quick question. So seizures are also electrical activity in the brain, right? This is also seems like an electrical activity in the brain. How do they compare? One is involuntary, the other one is voluntary. Is that the difference?
Seizure, c'est l'épilepsie. Ouais.
Et la question c'est
comment tu compares les deux? Est-ce que en fait l'épilepsie c'est une espèce de transe qui est pas décidée?
Oh no, the EEG showed that it was completely different.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's completely different. But in Mongolia, some epileptics, some kind of epileptic, but we don't know which one, are compared to shamanic powers.
In many traditions, actually, right? The epileptic people are considered the shamans.
Yeah. So it's not all the epilepsy, but some of them are considered shaman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, hi, thank you for the talk. I just have a question about diet. Is there any special diet that will help to induce this kind of trance states?
Oh, no diet. No. The diet was for Francis, the researcher, to help to heal the cancer. It was just for him, but we don't have any diet in this kind of practice. But we should, maybe.
I was wondering, in Mongolia with the shamans, do they have certain age limits before will they let children partake in trance states, and then how does that translate into your work?
It's not allowed to children. No, they wait. The children is 18, 19, 20. It's never before that age. And the end of the practice depends on your teeth.
Really?
Yes. If you lose your teeth, you lose your power.
Oh, wow.
Why?
Interesting.
Because you are not able to eat meat.
So you need to eat meat to be able to go into
in that culture, talking about diet. Yes. But usually in a family, when a child shows signs of something, it often starts with the child being very sick. And unusually, like they don't understand what's going on. And then they take the child to a shaman, and the shaman might say, oh, this one has the skills, you know, usually from an ancestor. And they explain to the family, if you don't train the child might die, might have more and more illnesses, more and more problems. But then the age, apprenticeship. I think it's on average 13 years in Mongolia, the apprenticeship to become a shaman. So it's not like, okay, I'm going a few months in the Amazon and then I'm a shaman. It's 13 years of very harsh apprenticeship to be able to deal with all those dimensions.
And have you heard of light language? Because it sounds like what I observed is similar to what people call light language.
I don't know.
I can connect you with some people.
Yes, yes.
Do you see your work as having similarities to holotropic breath work? And if so, do you want to work with them to get uptake in the psychiatric community if your research is successful?
Yes, holotropic breathwork. There are a lot of parallels between what this tool can do and many other things, you know, like that. What we've seen with a lot of people who have experienced holotropic breathwork is like the intensity, the physicality, you know, like all that happens like that. This doesn't happen in this. It's like much lighter, you know, as an experience. But definitely, because it's like those are different tools to access there.
Yeah, exactly.
So absolutely. And Stan Grof is aware of our work.
Right. But each tool, this is interesting because each tool sends you in different places. So this kind of tool could help you to do some research in certain field, but this kind of can go once you push you to another training. So each tool has its own interests.
Can we experience the sound loop?
Eh ben non.
Well, maybe not today, but we definitely use it in our one-on-one work. So definitely, that's a setting.
We could organize a workshop in Google if you want. We could organize a workshop. You have to be 10 is a good amount of people. We need good speakers, and it's possible. Yeah, and usually in the workshop with the artist, it takes 3 days to teach them how to self-induce trance. You know, three days of practicing the trance. It means 7, 8 trance, and after they're able to self-induce. You know, so it's not that long. So it depends on each, of course. Some will need more time to self-induce the trance, but the average is around this.
Well, thank you very much. It was beautiful to share all of this with you. Again, this beautiful idea, the encounter between an ancient technology and a new technology, especially being here at Google, I think is quite intriguing. I hope it piqued your curiosity and much more to explore. Thank you, Marius, again.
Yeah, thank you. That was amazing. So, thanks.